Greetings, friends. My name is Trickster. Let's begin our stories. Mark was the only security guard at the abandoned factory. He had been warned that strange things happened at night, but he did not believe in ghosts or supernatural phenomena. However, as he patrolled the empty corridors, he started to feel uneasy. Footsteps echoed through the halls, but when Mark investigated, there was no one there. Strange noises like whispers and moans filled the empty rooms, making his skin crawl. As he walked down one of the darker corridors, he saw a shadow moving across the floor. He drew his flashlight and shone it towards the shadow, but there was no one there. Suddenly, the lights went out, leaving Mark in complete darkness. He drew his gun, feeling a sense of dread creeping up on him. As he walked down the dark hallway, he heard a faint sound like a child crying. He followed the sound, his heart pounding with fear. The crying led him to a small room where he saw a young girl sitting in the corner, her face obscured by shadows. Mark approached her, trying to soothe her, but as he got closer, he realized that something was wrong. The girl turned to him, and he saw that her face was twisted into a grotesque mask of horror. Her eyes glowed red in the darkness, and she let out a piercing scream that echoed through the factory. Mark turned to run, but he felt something cold and slimy grab at his ankles, pulling him down. He struggled to break free, but he was dragged down into the darkness. The next morning, the factory owners found Mark's body, twisted and broken, lying in the same room where he had encountered the demonic girl. They closed the factory, too afraid to ever set foot inside again. It was a cold and dark night, and Jane was the only one on duty at the small, isolated gas station. The occasional car passed by, but other than that, it was eerily quiet. As the night wore on, Jane started to feel uneasy, like she was being watched by something unseen. Suddenly, the bell above the door jingled, and a man entered the gas station. He was tall, with dark hair and a long black coat. He approached the counter, but didn't say anything. Jane could see that his eyes were hollow and empty, like there was nothing behind them. "Can I help you with something?" Jane asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man continued to stare at her, saying nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills, slamming them down on the counter. "Just fill up my tank," he finally said, his voice cold and lifeless. Jane filled up the man's tank as quickly as possible, trying to avoid eye contact. She could feel his dark, menacing presence looming over her, and she knew that something was not right. As the man got back into his car and drove away, Jane heard a low, ominous chuckle coming from outside the gas station. She peered out the window but couldn't see anything in the darkness. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the gas station into complete darkness. Jane could feel a cold breath on the back of her neck, and she could hear a voice whispering her name over and over again. As she fumbled for a flashlight, she could feel a presence closing in on her. Something dark and malevolent. She knew that she was not alone, and that whatever was in the darkness was hungry for her soul. The next morning, the police found the gas station empty and silent with no signs of struggle. The crumpled bills left by the mysterious man were the only evidence of the night's events. But those who knew the gas station's history whispered that it was cursed, and that those who worked the night shift were never safe from the evil that lurked in the darkness. It was another lonely night shift at the old, dilapidated hospital. The halls were dimly lit, and the only sounds were the soft hum of the machines and the occasional creak of the old building settling. The lone nurse on duty sat at the nurse's station, her eyes heavy with fatigue. Suddenly, she heard a faint shuffling sound coming from down the hallway. She peered into the darkness, but couldn't see anything. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination. But the sound grew louder and more distinct. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a patient dressed in a hospital gown, with wild, unkempt hair and a pale, ghostly complexion. The nurse felt a shiver run down her spine as she watched the patient shuffle towards her. "Can I help you?" the nurse asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The patient said nothing, but continued to shuffle closer and closer, their eyes fixed on the nurse. As the patient approached, the nurse noticed something strange. The patient's eyes were completely black, with no whites or pupils. Suddenly, the patient lunged at the nurse, grabbing her by the throat. The nurse tried to scream, but no sound came out. She struggled against the patient's grip, but it was too strong. The last thing she saw before blacking out was the patient's dark, soulless eyes. The next morning, the day shift nurses arrived to find the lone night shift nurse slumped over the desk, her neck bruised and her eyes wide open in terror. The patient was nowhere to be found, but the nurses could feel a chilling presence lurking in the shadows, watching them from afar. They never spoke of the incident again, but they all knew that something evil had happened on the night shift.